Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Maayong buntag kaninyong tanan. Welcome sa ating panayam sa panitikan sa panahon ng pandemya or PAN. Sponsored po ng UP Institute for Creative Writing or UPICW. Tampok po sa araw na ito ang aklat pambata na pinamagatang At the School Gate at ang manunulat nito ay si Sandra Nicole Roldan. Bago po ang lahat, atin pong pakinggan ang opening remarks ng direktor ng UPICW na si Professor Romulo Baquiran Jr. Narito po siya.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Ako po si Joey Baquiran, ang Director ng UPICW. Welcome po dito sa ating talakayan sa isang napakagandang libro, ang At the School Gate ni Professor Sandra Nicole Roldan. Ang pangyayaring ito ay isang pagkilala o pag-alala sa ika-51 anibersaryo ng Batas Militar. Ang nangyaring kwento ay hindi naman nangyari sa panahon ng Batas Militar, ngunit ang praktika ng Administrasyong Marcos ay nagpapatuloy kahit pa sa loob ng panahon yon ng EDSA o pagkaraan ng EDSA Revolution na nangyari sa pamilya ng isang batang babae sa kanyang ama particularly at sa itong nakaka-stress na pangyayari sa kabataan at ngayon ay kinikilala natin ang libro bilang isang pagtatanghal o paglalantad ng mga hindi karaniwang nalalaman ng mambabasang Filipino. At ngayon ay umimbita tayo ng isang panel na upang ito ay talakayin, silipin at pahalagahan. Nag-imbita tayo ng mga tagapagsalita mula sa ibang bansa sa US at meron ding mga kaibigan na nagpapahalaga dito sa ating librong tatalakayin ngayong umaga at pag-uusapan at pahalagahan ang The School Gate ni Sandra Nicole Roldan. Kaya sana po ay magkaroon tayo ng mabungang talakayan dito sa ating proyekto ngayong umaga. Welcome po.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Joey, para sa inyong mga opening remarks. Ngayon po, narito po ang Associate Dean ng Kolehiyo ng Arte at Literatura ng Universidad ng Pilipinas, Diliman, si Associate Dean Maria Corazon Castro.
Thank you, Nico, and good morning to everyone. On behalf of Dean Naval, I'd like to welcome you to the College of Arts and Letters, and I would like to congratulate ICW for coming up with a lecture series such as this one. It would be interesting to listen to my colleague at the DECL, Sandra Roldan, as she shares with us the process and the challenges that went with the writing and the eventual publication of her book. Equally interesting are the events that resulted from the publication. We also look forward to the discussion of the panel, three of whom are former colleagues at the DECL. And I'm happy to see Lara here and Mon and the rest of you. And of course, Nico. No? As September fastly approaches, we are reminded of that dreadful day in September. Dreadful day in our history. It's been more than 50 years since the declaration of martial law, and people have seemed to have forgotten, no? The loss of many lives, the loss of freedom and democracy. Families and youthful dreams were shattered by this episode in our history. Hopefully, discussions like this can rekindle the sense of vigilance and the sense of involvement that all of us should have. Again, congratulations, ICW, and have a productive discussion, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Maricar, for your welcome remarks on behalf of the College of Arts and Letters. So, salamat po. Ngayon naman po, tumako tayo sa pagpapakilala ng mga magsasalita ngayong umaga. Kasama na po ang manunulat ng At the School Gate at ang mga reactors po natin ngayong umaga. Mag-umpisa po tayo sa ating manunulat, si Sandra Nicole Roldan. Sandra Nicole Roldan is the author of At the School Gate, published by Bookmark in 2018. Her first children's book, which describes the experiences of a young girl and her family during the martial law dictatorship and the years after. She has published essays, short fiction, and poetry in local and international publications, and received writing fellowships in the Philippines and abroad. She completed her Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts in Creative Writing at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, where she also taught literature and creative writing for almost 2 decades. Sandra is currently on a break from her PhD studies at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, or RMIT University. So, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries, mga kaibigan, si Sandra Roldan. Ngayon po, meron po tayong 3 reactors. Mauuna po sa pagsasalita si Frances Amper Sales. Frances Amper Sales is the author of Not Invisible, a poignant memoir of her first decade as a wife and mother. A former fellow of the UP National Writers Workshop, she is in the middle of writing 3 books when she finds time away from her work as a book editor, lifestyle writer, parenting blogger, and communications professional. She is married to novelist Vincent C. Sales, and they have 3 sons. Mga kaibigan, si Frances Sales. Kasunod po ni Frances ay si Jose Monfred C., o mas kilala sa Monsi. Si Jose Monfred C. ay katuwang na propesor ng Araling Pilipino sa Departamento ng Filipino at Panitikan ng Pilipinas, Universidad ng Pilipinas, Diliman. Nailathala ang ilan sa kaniyang mga pag-aaral hinggil sa panitikang pambata sa Plants in Children's and Young Adult Literature, Routledge 2021, at Martial Law at 50, mga alaala at kasaysayan ng pagbabalikwas, inilathala ng Ibon Foundation noong 2022. Nagsusulat at nagsasalin din siya ng mga kwentong pambata. Nagwagi ang kaniyang picture book na Kakatok-katok sa Bahay ni Benok, inilathala ng Canvas 2021, sa 29th Romeo Forbes Story Writing Competition at National Children's Book Awards 2022. Kasapi rin siya ng Congress of Teachers, Educators for Nationalism and Democracy, or CONTEND, at Supling Sining Incorporated. Mga kaibigan, si Monsi. Ang ating pangatlong reactor ay si Lara Sagisag. Lara Sagisag is the Georgiou Chair of Children's Literature and Literacy at New York University. Her current project examines representations of fossil fuels and their infrastructures in children's and young adult literature. She also studies the ways Filipino comics and children's literature express the afterlives of U.S. empire. Her essay, Labor in the Margins, Filipino Comics Workers in the U.S. Comics Industry, is scheduled for publication in Inks, the Journal of the Comic Society, this coming fall 2023. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries, Lara Sagisag. Oo nga pala po, ako si Nico Vitug. Ako po ang magiging moderator ninyo para sa ating session ngayon. So, estudyante po ng PhD Music sa College of Music ng UP Diliman. Ayan. So, anyway, mag-uumpisa po tayo sa speech ni Sandra Roldan tungkol sa kanyang aklat na At the School Gate. So, may I turn the floor to Sandra?
Good morning, everyone. Everybody calls my book a martial law children's book, but I'd like to begin by saying that strictly speaking, it is not a martial law children's book. While there is an actual flashback scene set during the martial law years, the events in my story happened towards the end of the Cory Aquino presidency. I wrote this story to demonstrate that for many Filipino families, the horrors of martial law did not actually end with the People Power Revolution of 1986. I am hoping that this book will help people realize that we are still living with the effects of the Marcos dictatorship until today. I wrote this story to question the very pastness of martial law and to show that human rights atrocities affect not just the activistas, but also their families and their children, martial law babies like myself and most of the people on today's panel. I speak these words now on the anniversary of the events I wrote about in my book, At the School Gate. It has been more than 30 years since these events happened, and I remain so traumatized that my brain is incapable of remembering the exact year. I don't like talking about the book because of all the trauma associated with it, and I honestly would rather have other people talk about it. To live through the events was immensely traumatizing, as you can imagine. The long, hard road to getting it written down and published was similarly traumatizing. And every time I get invited to events like this one, where I have to talk about the book, I am forced to relive the traumatic events over and over again. To talk about the book is to re-traumatize myself, which also means that promoting my book is almost like an act of self-harm. This is why I prefer to let readers and other scholars talk about it instead. I've always believed that a written work already speaks for itself. I have already done my job as writer. I've written it down and gotten it published. That writers need to promote their books at events like this one truly speaks of how broken our publishing ecosystem is here in the Philippines. The UP Institute of Creative Writing is helping writers do the necessary work of promoting our books, and I am truly grateful for this opportunity. But at a later point in this talk, I know I will have to address the elephant in the room and talk a little bit about my experience in Philippine publishing as a literary writer. To give a quick outline for my talk this morning, here are some points I'll be touching on. My motivations for writing At the School Gate, the process of writing and getting it published, initial reactions to the work, and lastly, what happened after publication. This book took me more than 20 years to write. The earliest seeds of this work were the entries in a journal I had to write for religion class back in high school, around the time the events happened to me in my family. And this is that journal. This is my religion notebook. The first actual version of it as written story was a narrative I wrote for Filipino class. Sadly, or maybe thankfully, I no longer have a copy of that juvenile work. As an undergrad at UP's creative writing program, I wrote a version of this story for a fiction workshop class under the late Clinton Palanca. I was still unhappy with that version of the story. Medyo hilaw pa, I guess. So when I started my MA in creative writing, I used several workshop classes to explore how I could transform the same set of events into different literary works. In Hemino Abad's poetry workshop class, I wrote The Man Who Wasn't My Father, which is a prose poem published in the Father Poems Anthology, edited by Hemino Abad and Alfred Yuson. For Cristina Pantoja Hidalgo's nonfiction workshop class, I wrote The Safe House, which was published as fiction in the now defunct Philippines Free Press magazine. That story was shortlisted for the Free Press Awards in 2007, and it remains my most widely read work because several textbook authors included The Safe House in literature textbooks for senior high school. And I still get Facebook messages from desperate high school students all over the country asking me to explain the meaning of my story because they were assigned to report about it in class. I never replied to them. Finally, I wrote the first version of At the School Gate for a young adult fiction workshop class taught by Carla Pasis. A highly abridged version of it appeared in 17 Magazine Philippines with illustrations by Fran Nang because my CW batchmate Lilda Shan Bose was a magazine editor who felt that the popular glossy magazines published by Summit in the early 2000s needed some substantial or even political content to balance the fluffy articles about fashion and makeup. I was honestly dissatisfied with the published version that came out in 17 Magazine. I was not used to the feeling of having big sections of my writing deleted by an editor who might not quite get why it was written that way in the first place. We must admit that we do not really do literary editing here in the Philippines. We do copy editing and proofreading instead. I have yet to encounter an editor who has made my published work truly better than the draft I submitted. So, with At the School Gate, I felt that it got eviscerated by 17 Magazine's well-meaning editors. So I kept the full original story unpublished for many years. I felt I needed to protect this story, which meant the world to me. But around 2015, medyo nang hinayang na ako that At the School Gate was still unpublished. Sayang naman, so I decided to submit the story to the Philippine Humanities Review, which is the peer-reviewed journal of UP Diliman's College of Arts and Letters. At the School Gate was rejected for publication, and the blind referee said something along the lines of, "This writer, that's me, should review Philippine history because human rights violations like this no longer happened after EDSA 1986. The fact that such an ignorant statement could come from a colleague at this university made me realize even more just how much we need this kind of narrative, one that goes beyond the rather simplistic conventions of our existing martial law stories. Of course, my story is historically accurate. Such violations happened to me and my family in 1991. It happened to our family friend Ferdinand Castillo in 2017. They did it to Tito Randall Echaniz in 2020, and to our UP National Writers Workshop batchmate Kerima Tariman in 2021. This horrific and heartbreaking list goes on, of course, until today. In the beginning, my obsession with writing and rewriting the story in different genres was an act of self-preservation, a way for me to deal with the trauma of being put under military surveillance at the age of 14. I was in high school, and the military inflicted psychological torture on my father by following me around and threatening my life. Ito ang suot ng anak mo kanina. Dito siya pumunta. Kahit ano pwede namin gawin sa kanya, pero wala kang magagawa. That was what they told Papa. So I felt the need to get this story right in order to turn the trauma into an object that is not only outside of myself to create distance, but also to transform the narrative, to control the narrative. I created the character of Ella Cortez as a stand-in for myself. But in the story, she is able to do the things that I could not do in real life, like confront the perpetrators of state violence. It was very important for me that Ella would feel empowered at the end of the story, precisely because I did not feel that way, not even now, 30 plus years after that traumatic event. Frances Ampersales described my book in one of her blog posts as being very dark and terrifying. And it needed to be dark and terrifying because it really was like that. However, for my trauma to be transformed into art, it had to have moments of brightness that would show the child reader that there is possibility for hope, for fighting back, for being brave, even in the darkest and most difficult times. Speaking of dark times, the next opportunity for At the School Gate to be published happened in 2016. When it became apparent that Duterte would become president, Bookmark, the publisher, commissioned Carla Pasis to put together an anthology of martial law stories to teach a younger generation how to face the realities of authoritarian rule. Carla immediately contacted me and asked for permission to include my story in that anthology project. In other words, with a populist president in Malacanang, my strange little, not quite martial law story suddenly became marketable. Bookmark contacted me in 2018 and told me that they decided to publish At the School Gate as a standalone book. An illustrated storybook does seem more appealing than a collection of depressing martial law stories. So I started working with a brilliant young illustrator from UP Fine Arts, Nina Martinez. And that was also the first time I've ever tried to collaborate with another creative person. Nina asked me if I had a vision for my book, and I decided to give her free rein, to allow her to tell my story visually and in the best way that she could. She gave me initial sketches and proofs and asked me how to best show the strong connection between Ella and her father, given that technically the father is an absent character throughout the story. We decided on using a pen, some object that was her father's, now being used by the daughter. I'd like to show you just that detail. So at the beginning, you see Ella using a pen, and in one of the few bright pages in the book, you see the pen with the father. This is like passing the baton from one generation of activists to the next. Working with Nina was a wonderful and painless process because she understood why the story needed to be written that way. Any corrections were limited to making sure that illustrations match the details mentioned in the text. Things like a batibot dining chair, Ella carrying a backpack instead of a satchel, or the school uniform. Sadly, I cannot say the same thing for the editor hired by Bookmark to trim down my text so it could fit the target number of pages for the storybook. That editor cut my story from almost 8,000 words to just 6,000 by deleting an entire scene, the scene with the grandmother and the lovebirds. Such a careless and cavalier approach to editing told me that both the editor and the publisher did not really get the point of my story. Basta lang may martial law children's book na sila in their catalog. It was so frustrating because without my needing to point it out, Nina, the illustrator, got it immediately, and she chose to visually highlight that scene right from the start of our collaboration. This is literally a very dark book. The illustrations are full of shadows and darkness, and there are only two bright spots in the book. One is the brightly colored spread with the lovebirds, and the other is at the end, where after Ella confronts the soldier, she finally feels courage and a sense of purpose. So let me just show you like how dark the book is. It's all shadows, dark colors, and then you have one bright scene in the middle of the book, and that was what they wanted to take out. And you have that bit of brightness also at the end of the book. Imagine the publisher was willing to cut that out the only scene in the entire book that directly depicts martial law in order to satisfy printing cost limitations. I settled on a compromise with Bookmark. Just give me a word limit and I will completely rewrite the text to fit both the target audience and printing costs. They asked me to remove certain details about the setting so that we would not be sued by SM, which was where intelligence agents abducted my father in 1991. In turn, I asked them not to italicize or translate into Tagalog the Ilocano words that I had used. Pero syempre, they still italicized what they wanted in the end. Italicizing non-English words is so ridiculous in our context, a remnant of colonial-era publishing practices. I also insisted on retaining the Ilocano words to demonstrate the fact that awanti solid north. Even pure Ilocano families like ours fought against the dictatorship. My contract with the publisher is both standard and unusual. They insisted that they share copyright with me. I also share royalties with the illustrator, which means I only get 6% in royalties instead of the standard percentage, whatever that is. Although the publisher is tasked with marketing and promoting my book, I have had to do a massive amount of work in promoting and distributing and even directly selling at the school gate. On my own dime, I sold copies of my book at the Singapore Writers Festival in 2018, where Kenny Leck of the late lamented Books Actually bought all the remaining copies that I had brought to Singapore. Another friend, Faye Kura of Gantala Press, generously featured my book at their booth in the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2019. My husband even produced promotional materials for Frankfurt. So postcards like this one, and then this really fancy pamphlet showing details from the book. And because my book, unlike most Pinoy literary titles, has 0 blurbs anywhere, I needed to ask 2 novelist friends, Michelle Ong Tin from Australia and Andreas Norman from Sweden, for quotes that I could use to market my book. I suppose my publishing contract is a bit different because, unlike most literary titles, my book's print run is relatively larger. Most poetry titles, I believe, have a print run of 500, while fiction books have 1,000. I'm not sure if that's still true. Bookmark decided to do an initial printing of 5,000 copies for my book. I don't know if this is unusual or even how they decided on that number, but definitely all of these questions on my part indicate a general lack of transparency in local publishing. There doesn't seem to be clear standards on what authors deserve. I do not know if existing groups like Umpil or PEN are doing any substantial work to protect and or negotiate with publishers on behalf of writers. And I'm not sure if it's because of the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, but since At the School Gate was published in 2018, I have not yet received a single peso in royalties. I also don't know how much of the original print run has been sold because the publisher has not yet given me the annual sales report mentioned in my contract. Still, despite all these, I remain grateful to Bookmark for taking a chance on my story, which after publication has received quite a lot of positive attention from readers, from the press, and even academics. At the School Gate has been included in several Best Books of the Year lists. It is often sold out in physical bookstores, and it was even singled out by then NBTV chair Neni Santa Romana Cruz in an Inquirer opinion column about the need to revisit and make sense of our collective martial law nightmare. My favorite responses are, of course, from the many children who have read my book, some of them as young as 8 years old. They got my message loud and clear. There are many ways to be brave, and as long as we see something wrong, we should never stop fixing it. Many readers have asked me for a sequel, but I'm not sure how to write that. They want to know what happened to Ella and her father. I just tell them that Ella's father was released from political detention right after Christmas that year. I wanted to tell them Ella is okay, but I'm not sure if she is, given that the killings never stopped. And now we have another Marcos in Malacanang. The funny thing about writing this book is that I've come to conflate myself with Ella, and the events in my life blur into what I had written in my story. Writing this has changed my memories of what actually happened, which in the end tells us that art, with a capital A, triumphs ultimately over personal history. Since my book was published in 2018, I have been red tagged many times. I have received death threats online. I've even been harassed and put under surveillance by military agents during the pandemic lockdown of 2020. If anything bad happens to me now, at least I've already written this book. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for your powerful sharing. At this juncture, as moderator, although nabanggit ko na po ito sa mga reactor natin ngayon, no? Para sa mga magtatanong po at magko-comment sa ating Facebook Live mamaya, gusto ko pong banggitin na bagamat akademikong espasyo itong ating online forum, no, today, it's a public and online academic event. I would like to request people, kung medyo sensitibo yung sasabihin, no, kung maaaring mag-affix doon sa post ninyo ng trigger warning or TW, para lang kung sakasakaling sensitibo ay yung gusto natin na mapanatili yung pagiging safe space quality, kahit na kailangan pa rin natin banggitin kung ano man yung mga issues na gusto nating i-tackle, no, as much as we can. Bilang academic space, we'd like to keep a semblance of safety in this discussion dahil sensitibo nga po ang material. So maraming salamat, Sandra. Ngayon, tatawagin ko ang ating unang reactor para sa umagang ito. At ang una nating reactor ay si Frances Amper Sales. Frances, you have the floor. I'm sorry, I got moderated. So ngayon po, ang gagawin natin ay manonood po tayo ng isang short video na mula sa isang excerpt mula sa At the School Gate. Pasensya na po. So anyway, panoorin po natin itong short video mula sa At the School Gate. Thank you.
I was conceived at the Camp Crame Detention Center for Political Offenders, one February night in 1976. With Papa in jail, Mama worked as a newspaper reporter. Kuya Marx was only 3 months old. That day, Mama made a conjugal visit to celebrate Valentine's Day with Papa behind bars. I was born 9 months later. We all lived in our grandparents' house until Papa was released. It was hard for writers to find jobs during martial law. So Papa worked for the government and we moved to a tiny apartment in an NHA housing project. We still live there. Growing up, I remember meeting the new titos and titas every week. Some brought papers and talked at our dining table until late at night. Others had bandages on their arms or legs. All of them slept on banigs in the living room, like a big communist slumber party. Some nights I'd lie awake, listening to my new relatives sobbing softly like a small animal, or whispering quietly like the wind in the trees outside our window. I thought that period in our family life ended in 1986 with People Power. Everyone flashed the Laban sign, Cory had yellow confetti parades, and EDSA became the most famous street in the world. I was so excited because Americans on TV kept saying congratulations to the Philippines. I thought it was like winning the sweepstakes and all the Filipinos would become rich. No more beggars in the street or little kids selling sampaguita at night. I now know things are more complicated. I should have remembered my grade 4 history lesson. Bad presidents like Marcos may come and go, but they will always stay in power. This was how I first saw Papa on television. A high-ranking officer of the Communist New People's Army was arrested last Wednesday, August 21 at a mall in Quezon City. The suspect, a certain Buggy Cortez, resisted arrest. He was caught carrying a .45 caliber pistol and subversive documents. Cortez is being kept for questioning at Camp Aguinaldo. The TV screen showed Papa facing a mob of reporters and cameramen. Behind him sat a long line of uniformed men with medals on their chests. Finally, there he was. The military said Papa was one of the most dangerous rebels captured in recent years. So dangerous, he was led into the conference room blindfolded and handcuffed behind his back. 2 soldiers flanked him and led him forward. With his back blindfold, he looked like a chubby Zorro, wearing a pale blue long-sleeve shirt that wasn't his. I noticed the sleeves were buttoned at the wrist, not rolled up to his elbows like he usually wore them. Maybe they were trying to hide what they did to his arms. They took off his blindfold but kept him shackled. Papa was not allowed to make a statement, not even a clenched fist raised in defiance like other political prisoners. He just stood there, blinking against the cameras and the flashbulbs. His hair stood up in places. His face was puffy, bruised, and bloated. His eyes were watery and red. He looked a little lost. I hardly recognized him. The reporter could have been talking about a different man altogether. It was now Monday, as crazy as all the other rainy Mondays that have come before. I wasn't the only one late for school that day. Around me were cars driven by parents bringing their daughters to school. Mothers held out water jugs and lunch bags. Fathers counted out the week's allowance into their daughters' open palms. Nice, normal families saying their good mornings, kissing their goodbyes. Once inside the school gates, I knew I'd feel worse. First bell. I turned, hoping to disappear. But there he was again, a few feet away, grinning at me. The tall man in army boots leaned against a pillar near the school gate. Everything faded to silence. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to hit him with my chemistry book. I wanted to run away. It was us against them, me against him. But I knew I couldn't fight him. Then I remembered what Papa said that day at the cemetery. As long as there's something wrong, you don't stop fighting. You just learn to fight in a different way. I decided I wouldn't let them ruin my life. They wanted to find out stuff about me, then I'll tell them stuff about me. I made eye contact and approached that bullet-toothed man. He was not going to make me lose my nerve, quit school, or break eye contact. Look, whoever you are, I'm Liliosa Gabriela Cortez. I know you're military. Go tell Papa I'm okay. I finished my article. I studied for my history exam. I'm having dinendeng for lunch today. I wish you'd stop following my family. But I can't make you stop doing your job. Tell Papa, I am not afraid anymore.
Maraming salamat po sa mga naging bahagi nitong mahusay na short film rendering ng At the School Gate ni Sandra Nicole Roldan. At siguro bago po tayo magpatuloy, nais kong personal na magpasalamat sa ginawa ni Sandra. Napaka makapangyarihan na kwento. Pero syempre kung may siguro kung may isang kaunting tuwa na makukuha tayo sa nangyayari ngayon, ito yung posibilidad na pwede ang pagbabago, no? At ito yung nakukuha natin sa panahong ito sa pamamagitan ng mga ganitong kwento. So, sa ngayon po, sorry sa ating unang reactor na tinawag ko a little too early. Tatawagin ko po ulit si Frances Amper Sales for her reaction to At the School Gate. Frances, finally you have the floor. Sorry about that.
Hi, no, that's fine. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat na nanonood. Okay, let me think. Okay, kasi when I read this book, this was 2 years ago. So, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. Times have changed since 2021. So, nung binili ko yung libro, I actually didn't know what it was all about. I thought it was a children's book. And as a mother, and I think I'm here to react as a mother. As a mother, I was excited to read it to my kids, diba? Pero syempre, binasa ko muna. Because, you know, parents have to curate. And when I was reading it, I couldn't just react as a mother, pero as a Filipina also. And dahil kilala ko rin yung author, syempre hindi ko rin ma-separate yung feelings ko for what she went through. Yes, we know it's fiction, but is it really fiction, right? So eventually I did talk to my kids about this book nga. Sabi ko, uy, kilala ko yung author, ganyan, tapos ito yung nangyari, and then we were talking about it. And my reaction is really this, that magkaiba yung reaction namin ng mga anak ko. Yung reaction ko is, and I'm ashamed to say, is fear talaga. Kasi, nung time na, kasi, well, we know who the president is right now again, right? So parang, I was so depressed last year dahil sa result ng elections. And reading this book and talking about it with my kids, parang I felt really defeated. Whereas yung mga anak ko, and thank you, Sandra, for ending it in a hopeful tone. They were like, well, as long as you think you're doing the right thing, then it's going to be okay. And I was just thinking, buti pa yung mga bata. They have hope. Kasi, sa totoo lang, di ba nga sabi, Neil Gaiman quoted Chesterton. He said that fairy tales, I may be saying it wrong, but fairy tales are good not because they introduce dragons to the children, but because it tells children that they can defeat the dragons. And of course, I was thinking, but the monsters are still out there. We haven't done our part. So this book was very, nalungkot ako, natakot ako, pero buti pa yung mga bata, I guess because they're kids. My kids were really thinking, no, it's okay, we're gonna fight. You know, we're gonna fight by like how Ella did it. You know, she ate lunch and she finished her homework, and you know, all these things. You know, just living your life is a form of protest, I guess. So that's my reaction to your book, Sandra. Thank you for writing it. You're very brave.
Maraming salamat, Frances, for that very heartfelt reaction. I do agree with you that there's something about young people and their capacity to hope, and I think that will be the opening. As much as our, pag maiiyak tayo, parang may bumubukas sa puso at gumagaang ng kaunti para makakilos tayo forward tungo sa pagbabago. So maraming salamat, Frances, at talagang nakakonect ka sa aklat na ito. Ngayon, tutuloy naman tayo sa ating second reactor na si Monsi. Monsi?
Maraming salamat, Nico, sa iyong pagpapakilala. Maraming salamat din, Ma'am Frances, sa panguna sa reaksyon. At syempre, kay Ma'am Sandra, no, na naalala ko pa noong una kong nakuha yung aklat mula sa kanya. No? Talagang direct to the source. At ngayon ka lang naunawaan kung bakit. Bakit si Ma'am Sandra ay may pagtatangkang talaga, no, magbenta rin ng kopya ng sarili niyang aklat. Kanina, tumatak sa akin yung unang sinabi ni Ma'am Sandra hinggil dun sa aklat na this is not a martial law children's book. No? Tunay na lalo pa nitong pinaiigting yung ideya na yung batas militar ay hindi natapos at hindi lamang natatali doon sa pamilyang Marcos. No? Para sa akin bilang isang guro no, na hindi naabutan yung panahon ng batas militar, nakatutulong tong mga aklat na ito para mas maunawaan at makongkreto, maisa konkreto yung danas na hindi ko man nadanas yung batas militar, nararanasan natin no, sa kasalukuyang panahon. Para sa akin nga, tila isang pag-aaral ng dalumat at danas ng demokrasya sa Pilipinas, no, yung At the School Gate. Binibigyang katwiran nito yung pagpapatuloy ng dahas, no, yung nakikita natin sa landscape ng kwento doon sa ilustrasyon na ginawa ni Nina na isa ko ring kaibigan, mula doon sa malamlam na landscape ng malungkot na tarangkahan na basang-basa sa ulan hanggang dun sa safe house na yung tanging liwanag lang ay yung telebisyon, no, na may hatid na balita hinggil sa papa ni Ella. Tulad na nabanggit na rin ng author kanina, makabuluhan yung liwanag sa mga ilustrasyon. No? Dala-dala nito yung pag-asa, hindi lamang pag-asa actually, kundi pagtindig, no, laban sa karahasan, laban sa batas militar. Na bagamat hindi nga dinanas ni Ella yung batas militar, yung pagkawala sa kanya ng kanyang ama ay anyo ng pagbumulto, no, ng malawakang pag-aresto nung panahon ng diktaduryang Marcos. Inilalagay tayo ng kwento, no, inilalagay nito yung parehong batang karakter, no, at yung batang mambabasa, maging tayo mga adult readers na, no, mga scholars, writers, doon sa kilabot ng panahon ng batas militar. At tulad nga nung ipinaliwanag ko rin doon sa isang pag-aaral na sinulat ko hinggil sa aklat, no, ay yung pagkabalisang dulot ng pandarahas sa isang miyembro ng pamilya ni Ella at yung pansamantalang alwang handog ng alaala, no, na kinukwento ng kanyang lola, ng kanyang mga ibang relatives, no, yung tumatayong gabay sa batang mambabasa sa pag-unawa sa pagkawala na maaaring hindi nararanasan ng bata sa kasalukuyan, ngunit patuloy pa rin. No? Marami pa rin mga bata ang nawawalan ng mga magulang na aktivista, mga journalist at iba pa. No, gamit yung pagkabata o yung childhood bilang sentral na dalumat nung aklat pambata na ito, sinasariwa ng kwento ang alaalang sariwa pa. No? Ito ay nangyari sa panahon ni Cory Aquino, batid nga ng ating author kanina. Masasabing integrasyon din ito ng mismong pagtukoy ng publiko ng mga Pilipino sa batas militar bilang bahagi na lamang ng kasaysayan. Ganong nararanasan pa rin ang mga bakas nito, yung mga iterasyon nito, hanggang sa kasalukuyan. No, ito na nga yung sinasabi ng author kanina na pagsusuri din ito sa pastness, no? Pagka-question even ng pastness dahil minsan pag nalalagay natin ng isang bagay tulad nito, isang event tulad nito bilang bahagi ng kasaysayan, tinuturing na lang to bilang bahagi ng textbook, bilang bahagi ng classroom. Kahit na ito pa rin ay bahagi ng pang-araw-araw na buhay ng mga Pilipino hanggang sa kasalukuyan. No, lalo na ngayon, no, na yung ating Pangulo ay bahagi ng pamilya ng diktador. No? At nagkaroon din ng malaking papel sa pag-yurak ng karapatan ng mga Pilipino noong panahon ng batas militar. Hindi may kakaila na bahagi yung aklat na ito, yung At the School Gate, sa daluyong ng mga radikal, no, na panitikang pambata sa Pilipinas sa bingit ng ika-21 taon. No? Isinusulong nito ang demokrasya, justisyang panlipunan, at pakikibaka ng mga mamamayan sa isang napaka-personal at isang kwento na malapit sa danas ng bata. No? Isang editor, no, ng school newspaper, maraming relate din talaga doon. Antig ako sa kwento, no? Nung una kong mabasa yung At the School Gate, nung nabigyan nga ako ng kopya ng author, nagiyak din ako mismo na magsulat ng kwentong pambata na no, nagtatangkaring maarok yung talas at tapang na bit-bit nung aklat ni Ma'am Sandra. No, masasabi ko nga na tumulong ito, no, yung pagbabasa ko nito na magluwal nung isa kong aklat na Kakatok-katok sa Bahay ni Beno, na humaharaya naman doon sa danas ng extrajudicial killings sa ilalim ng rehimeng Duterte. No, at naniniwala ako na kinakailangan ng mga sumusunod na henerasyon ng kabataang Pilipino na malaman na umiiral ang karahasan ng may kapangyarihan sa iba't ibang anyong naiibang pangalan, no, ngunit kawangis at kasindumal ng batas militar ni Marcos. Kaya bukod sa pagsusulat ng mga sa tingin ko, no, mga inspired by ng At the School Gate na mga kwento, ano rin to, no, tinuturo ko rin sa Philippine Studies 21 o PS21. Ito yung kurso sa UP na Wika, Panitikan at Kultura sa ilalim ng Batas Militar sa Pilipinas. No, bigla ko lang naalala yung binanggit ni Ma'am Frances kanina, yung talinhaga ng mga dragon. 'Di ba? Na parang yung mga dragon ay dapat matutunan ng mga bata na may mga dragon, may mga kaaway talaga sa lipunan. Hindi lahat ay masaya, hindi lahat ay good people, at dapat matutunan din kung paano lumaban sa mga ito. No, na naisip ko, minsan tayo mga adult, nakalilimot kung paano lumaban. 'Di ba? Kaya napakahalaga talaga na manood sa mga bata at kabataan in general, tulad ng mga college students, na may pangangailangan pa rin lumaban. No? Dahil nandiyan pa rin yung mga dragon. 'Di ba? Sa PS21, bilang isa tong kursong pangkolehiyo, ipinapaliwanag talaga namin sa mga mag-aaral yung sistemang nagbubunsod at nagsusustena doon sa karahasan at tinustisyang panlipunan. Dahil hindi maaaring ikulong natin sa batas militar sa panahon ng dekada 70 at 80 itong nangyayari sa ating bansa, no? Sa PS21, pinapangalanan namin ito na pasismo, no? Very explicit and clear para sa mga mag-aaral. Pasismo, isang anyo ng authoritarianismo na ginagabayan ng ideolohiya nagnanais magpataw ng isang imagined community, no? Tulad ng bagong lipunan, tulad ng Make America Great Again. No? Pinapataw itong imagined community na ito sa pamamagitan ng pagkitil sa lahat ng hadlang dito. Ito man ay mga aktivista, mga quote-unquote komunista, na pinapangalanan bilang mga terorista, pinapatay, no? Tinatanggal ang mga iyan para daw maabot ng isang bansa ang imagined community tulad ng bagong lipunan. Na sa katunayan, lahat ng karahasang ito ay para lamang sa pakikinabang ng kapitalistang elite, no? Hindi natin mahihiwala yung kasaysayan ng pag-usbong ng pasismo, no, sa Europa sa partikular, doon sa pagpapaigting ng kapangyarihan ng kapitalismo sa maraming mga bansa. Tulad na nangyayari ngayon sa Timog Silangang Asya, na tila sunod-sunod, no, yung papaigting ng mga kamay na bakal, no, sa ating region. No, actually sa PS21 ikinatuwa ng maraming mga mag-aaral yung pagbabasa ng At the School Gate, no. Sana sila ay bumili ng mga kopya, no, hindi lamang nagpa-photocopy para ma-reprint yung aklat na ito. Binabanggit nila na concretize para sa kanila yung pasismong umaalpas at umaapaw doon sa batas militar ni Marcos. Dahil doon sa huling bahagi ng PS21, ang tinatalakay na doon ay yung kamay na bakal pagkatapos ng diktadurang Marcos. So para sa kanila, nabasa nila yung mga journal articles, nabasa nila yung mga book chapters, pero naging very personal at naging emotional sila doon sa kwento. Sa ibang salita, naging tulay ito, no? Yung pagkukwento bilang isang sentral na dalumat din doon sa At the School Gate ay hindi lamang natin makikita doon sa mismong naratibo, no? Kasi yung pagkukwento, naging tulay ito para kay Ella para maunawaan yung panahon ng batas militar. Yung mismo pagkukwento ng author ng aklat na ito, yung paglikha niya ng aklat na ito, ay nagiging tulay din para sa mga batang mambabasa at kabataang mambabasa sa kasalukuyan na maunawaan yung danas ng karahasan sa panahon ng batas militar. Kaya nga ngayon, parang siguro isang tanong din para sa atin, no, hamon para sa lahat ng manonood, manunulat man, guro, librarian, o mga mag-aaral, kung paano natin ipagtatagpo yung sarili nating kaligtasan doon sa pangailangan na isalaysay ang ganitong mga kwento sa taong bayan. Lalo na yung PS21 din, nung una itong na-institute sa UP, umabot siya sa balita, talagang marami ng red tag, no, sa aming departamento, sa mga guro ng Philippine Studies, na sinasabing magtuturo ito ng paano lumaban sa gobyerno. Bagkus sa tinuturo dito ay tungkol sa kasaysayan, di ba? At kung paano patuloy na alalahin ito at sariwain ito sa kasalukuyan. Hindi alintana sa atin ang nangyayaring atake laban sa mga aktivista, laban sa mga lehitimong mga organisasyon na susulong ng pagbabago sa lipunan. Dito pa lamang sa UP, minsan feeling natin relatively safe tayo mga guro, mag-aaral. Pero kung makita natin yung track record, no, ng unang taon ni President Bongbong Marcos, ang dami na pang-atake, no? Pang-aapak sa kalayaang akademiko, paniniil sa mga aktivista na ating nakita sa ating mga faculty, students, alumni. Nandiyan na si Dr. Melania Flores ng UP Diliman na kinasuhan ng kung ano-anong SSS law na case, no? Dahil siya ay isang unionista, veteranong unionista sa ating pamantasan. Gayon din sa ibang mga unit, sa ibang mga constituent units, so sa UP Cebu, si Dayan at Armand, no, na parehong alumni, at si Armand mismo na isang lecturer sa UP Cebu, dinakip sa airport, sa seaport. Kita-kita ng mga tao, harap-harapan, daylight. No, yung pagkuha sa kanila naman, bila ko naalala yung video na pinapanood namin dito sa QC. Pinapanood namin yung video na nangyari sa kanila, aming mga kasamahan sa Alliance of Concerned Teachers. Hindi lang nakakatakot, nakakagalit, nakakaiyak. Yung pakiramdam na kung nung panahon ni Duterte, tinatago pa no, yung pang-aatake, lalo na sa Maralitang Lungsod. Ito harap-harapan. Na wait lang, yan yung tinuturo ko sa PS21. Yan yung pag-uusapan namin sa mga pulong namin sa Union. Totoo siya. Diba? Ang pagkakaiba lang siguro, sa kasalukuyang panahon, may video Pero mas nakakatakot nga na makita yung video na ganito yung pwedeng gawin ng Estado laban sa mga aktivista. No? Hindi nalalayo sa katunayan ng batas militar noong panahon ni Marcos. No, hanggang ngayon, yung mga kasamahan natin sa UP Baguio ay nananawagan pa rin sa pagsasurface kina Dexter at Bazoo. Parehong mga alumni din ng UP Baguio. At syempre, hindi natin makakalimutan no, yung pag-agaw sa atin ng mga buhay ng mga militante at aktivistang manunulat tulad ni ng Kirima at Erickson Acosta. Na si Kirima nga ay kaibigan din namin no, ni Ma'am Sandra. Sobrang real, no? Katotohanan itong pandarahas sa ating taong bayan, lalo na sa mga aktivista. Pero walang ligtas no? Kahit sino ay pwedeng maging biktima, at I think yun yung mahalagang na ipapabatid sa atin at the school gate. Na bagaman napabagsak ang diktadurang Marcos, nagpapatuloy pa rin ang pasismo dahil yung sistema no na nagsusustena ng pasismo ay nananatili pa rin. At ang pangailangan na pinapakita ng aklat na ito ay hindi lamang pagbabago sa kung sino nakaupo sa Malacanang, kundi mas malawakang pagbabago ng lipunan, pag-reorganisa nito tungo doon sa isang bansang may pagkapantay-pantay at respeto sa karapatang pantao. Dapat ay may hamon tayo no, pagkatapos basahin yung libro na maging bahagi ng malawakang kilusang antipasista. No, laban sa pasismo sa ating bansa, no. Kung kayo ay nasa UP nga no, syempre may shameless plug ako no. Inaanyayahan ko na rin kayong tumungo doon sa Facebook page ng ating UP Office of the Faculty Regent kasi nagkaroon ng panukala ang Faculty Regent kasama ng ibang sectoral regents na magkaroon ng Committee to Uphold Academic Freedom and Human Rights, no, isang official UP committee na talagang kailangan na natin, no, tayo na inaatake. Hinintay na lamang yung administrative order para dito, pero medyo na-delay ata. No? Hindi siya napaprioritize. So meron tayong petition ngayon kasama rin ng All UP Academic Employees Union para masabi sa ating Pangulo na kailangan niya na itong ilabas. Diba? At syempre, para naman sa mga manunulat at mga guro, no, patuloy tayong magsulat, lumikha ng mga akda na sisiwalat sa publiko, hinggil sa pasismo. Hindi na lamang hinggil sa alaala. No? Of course, dapat mapagpatuloy yan, pero maging explicit na tayo sa pagpapangalan ng kung ano ba ang sistema na nagpapatuloy ng pandarahas at inihustisyang panlipunan no, sa Pilipinas. At sa huli, no, bagaman tayo ay may mga sarili ding mga gawain o papel sa lipunan bilang mga manunulat, guro, librarian at iba pa mga magulang, no, mainam din na maging bahagi din tayo ng mga mas malawak pang pagkilos, mas malawak na mga pagkakakilanlan, identidad, organisasyon doon sa individual, no? Laging sinasabi sa amin na kahit nung bata-bata pa ako na aktivista rin, no, na mas ligtas tayo sa paraan ng kolektiba, no? So siguro ngayong nakita na natin yung rurok, no, ng pagkalimot hinggil sa batas militar na may talaga hamon tayo na balikan din yung pakikibakang panlipunan, pakikibakang bayan ng panahon na ito. At buhayin ito sa kasalukuyang panahon laban doon sa mga banta sa ating mga karapatan, sa ating kalayaang akademiko at sa ating mga buhay sa kasalukuyang panahon. No, maraming salamat po at hintayin po namin yung inyong mga tanong sa open forum mamaya. Maraming salamat, Ma'am Sandra, din para sa pagsusulat ng napakatalas at napakatapang na aklat na ito.
Maraming salamat, Monsi, no? Napaka-rich ng iyong mga sinabi, no? Siguro bilang paglalagom lang, iniisip ko talaga yung imahen ng paghahawak kamay. So parang for example, may pinapasa ka na kwento na mahalaga sa kasunod mo at mahalagang kwento ito para sa kasunod na henerasyon. Pero may kaakibat itong mga risks, no? May mga kaakibat na ano, at tanong talaga natin yan, ano yung kailangan, paano natin i-involve ang ating sarili despite things that have happened to us, and these are not easy questions, no? But I love the bravery of your remarks. So maraming salamat. Patuloy natin yang pag-uusapan sa open forum. So ang ating huling reactor para sa umagang ito ay si Lara Sagisag. Lara, ready?
Hi, maraming salamat at magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I want to start by thanking Professor Sandra Roldan, Professor Romulo Baquiran, ang aking mga co-panelists si Frances Sales at saka si Monsi, and the wonderful staff of Likhaan, of UP's Institute of Creative Writing for inviting me to this event, and for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts about Sandra's important book at the school gate. Actually, hindi ako makahindi sa invitation kasi parang homecoming sa akin to, no? Kasi many years ago, estudyante ako at instructor ako sa UP Department of English and Comparative Literature, and I also worked for the ICW under Professor Cristina Pantoja Hidalgo. Belated happy birthday nga pala, Jing. So, this, but I think more important, no, this event was really meaningful for me kasi I'm a martial law baby, and many of you might know my father, who was a human rights lawyer, who defended many victims of the Marcos regime, and he was arrested and detained for challenging the Marcoses. So Sandra's book has really meant a lot to me, and I feel privileged to have this chance to converse with all of you about it. So at the school gate, in my mind, does really crucial cultural work in the sense, and here I'm just reiterating what Sandra has already said, what Mon also said, no, na it really is urging us to reflect on how we narrativize our history, and I think more specifically at the school gate is directing us to think about the narratives that we tell about the 1986 EDSA revolution. I think many of us often think about the people power revolution as marking a return to democracy, and yes, it was undeniably a peaceful mass movement that ended a 20-year dictatorship, but Sandra's book is also forcing us to confront how post-EDSA dissent has remained policed and criminalized. This book is, can be unsettling, but I think it's a necessary and forceful acknowledgement of human rights violations, including massacres that were carried out by the state beyond the Marcos regime. One of the things I want to also briefly talk about this book is that it's the school setting. So some of the scenes in this book occurs in the school. In fact, we open the narrative na Ella is at school, and she's complaining about all the rules that she has to follow in her Catholic school, and she describes the school as somewhat claustrophobic. So on the one hand, right, like we can see this as it's a perspective of a young girl who is complaining about her unfashionable school uniform. Sabi nga niya, baduy daw, diba? But I wonder whether, this opening scene is a way for us to also think about our systems of education, like the ways that our systems of education are habituating young Filipinos to be a particular kind of citizen, like one who conforms, one who is obedient. But I think on the flip side too, right, this book also shows us how our protagonist represents the capacity of young people to resist and to ask questions. Like, she's hardly a passive character who does what she is told. But something that also interested me, and actually very, relate ako kasi I went to a Catholic school. Alam ko naintindihan ko yung moments na minimeasure nga ng mga nuns yung medyas ko. So again, like the story is told from Ella's, the story is Ella's story, right? So from her perspective, the nuns are there to mainly scold her and then measure the height of her socks. But I wonder whether we can open this up, this conversation up, and maybe even try to complicate like that stereotype of nuns, given that the history of I guess like just educating young people also about the roles that nuns played in histories of feminism and activism and militancy in the Philippines, like because I think I'm just, I guess, recalling my own experience as a Catholic schoolgirl, where it was actually a very confusing experience for me, because on the one hand, ito nga ang daming demands to obey, to conform, but on the other hand, many of the nuns who were teaching us were also teaching us like the tenets of liberation theology. So it was such an interesting tension. So and I wonder whether it's worth also kind of like again, this book allows for that kind of conversation. As an educator now based in the US, I also think about what it could mean to teach this book to Filipinos and non-Filipinos outside of the Philippines. So, and I'm thinking that books such as At the School Gate may have the potential to build an understanding of transnational solidarity. So I'm specifically thinking about the growing number of books in the US that interrogate policing and incarceration. So baka familiar kayo sa mga titles like The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes, kasi both these books point to the ways that police and prisons target and harm Black and Brown communities in the US. And then there are books by Caravan to the North by Jorge Argueta, We Hereby Refuse by Frank Abe, and Internment by Samira Ahmed. And these books criticize the xenophobia that leads to the policing of borders and that resulted in the incarceration of Japanese Americans in World War II and the surveillance and unlawful detention of Arabic and Muslim visitors and citizens post 9/11. So I'm just, I think there's potential to kind of like show young readers how they can make connections between At the School Gate and these books about the U.S. carceral systems. To because I'm thinking, I can't help but think about the, what people call the how do I put this, like the coloniality of the Philippine police, prison systems, and the military, like that these institutions are a continuation of the ways that U.S. imperial forces policed and punished so-called insurrectionists during the U.S. colonial period, no? So parang I think yung history here, like I think Mon was encouraging us to look at yung making connections between yung Batas Militar nung 1972 to 1986, right? Hanggang sa ngayon, right? And I think that we can go even further. Like if we look at yung policing systems, yung military system, these are things that we the Philippines, the Philippine state adopted from U.S. Empire, and I'm really fascinated by how that plays out in the book. And for me, the book. And I don't know whether Sandra will agree with me on this about the ending. Kasi sa akin, the book is not a happy ending, right? I think, and it's good that way. It disrupts the common notion that children's books must have a happy and comfortable ending, a sense of completion. So definitely the denouement shows us that Ella stands up to like this military man who's stalking and harassing her family. So I think this is an important signal, right, of the development of her character. But the story ends and we don't know what happens to her father. Like we have no assurance whether Ella's act will prevent future instances of harassment. And I think may potential na some young and old readers might feel uncomfortable by the lack of this kind of like clean ending. But I think this unsettling conclusion is important to pay attention to, because it reminds us that democracy is not an endpoint. It's a project that we must work on continuously, right? Na parang hindi siya yung endpoint nung kwento. Parang part siya ng kwento continuously. And I think yun yung failure ng EDSA. I think we thought that was our happy ending, and then happy ever after na tayo lahat. I think maraming nakakalimot na actually the work was just about to start. So I think I like to think of the ending of At the School Gate really more as a beginning than an ending, because it's this moment when Ella refuses to simply accept what is going on, and refuses to live in fear. As a final point, I just saw the film 11,103 today, and I'm guessing it's a film that's familiar to many of you. And I was just thinking of what Sandra was saying earlier, about the pain she has to go through every time she has to tell this story. That the writing of the story was incredibly painful, and dun sa film they showed how some victims of martial law were opening up for the first time, where they were telling it in the records of film. That was their first time of telling the story, because it was unspeakable. And I just think about that, right? Like we can't blame them for the hurt. We can't blame them for not being able to say what they could not say. And I'm just wondering, like, I guess it's a question I'm also thinking about, right? Like, how do we continue stories when we can see that the telling of these stories can cause harm to the teller of the stories? How do we hold them in care, right, as the listeners of these stories? So I'm also looking forward sa questions and comments during the open forum. Pero maraming salamat talaga. Thank you for giving me this space to talk about At the School Gate, and I'm also very, very eager to hear how other folks have responded to it. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Lara, for your remarks. I think medyo i-extend ko yung metaphor ko kanina. So sabi ko yung hawak kamay, pagpapasang, pati yung sakit, ipinapasa. Pero actually complicated yung hawak kamay na yun. There are many alliances, and the alliances have become broader and broader. Different sectors and different, even with certain nuances in political beliefs. You're right, definitely there were nuns who were part of the struggle in even with the Jesuits, di ba, mga kaparian, within nagkaroon ng turmoil sa simbahan. So actually it's quite siguro that's a spark of hope, baka po pwedeng yung hindi natin natapos noon, may mga lugar pa, maraming lugar kung saan tayo pwede magsimula, at pagbaguhin ang lipunan. So maraming salamat, Lara, for that, sa ngayon dumako na po tayo sa ating question and answer portion at sa ating open forum. So siguro I would like to get the ball rolling, so to speak, by building on the last thing that Lara said, and I think one of the most important, actually yung isa sa mga nakita ko dun sa remarks kasi ni Sandra, is yung pangangailangan isang etikang consistent, a consistent ethic that actually moves from the social, from the national and even the transnational to the very specific, like publication ethics, so talagang there is a particular need for reviewing our ethics, I think, but before so it's tangentially related to that, yung sinabi ni Lara about how do we care for our storytellers, for our witnesses. I think one of the things, may mga magkwentuhan tayo, no? May mga ano na yung mga efforts na ganyan ngayon na parang sa nakikita ninyo, ano yung mga alyansang nakikita na natin na nakakatulong sa babahagi ng mga mahalagang kwento, pero yung meron ng mga nuances na mahalaga katulad ng care for our companions in the journey. Sana hindi malabo ang aking mga pinagsasasabi. Char. Salamat. Sige, Lara, maybe you can start telling, have you seen anything?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Kaya ako pinost yun kasi tanong ko rin eh. But I think, so actually just to go back to the example that I just witnessed, no, yung film 11,103. I think yung one thing that I noted was and I wonder whether this was I wish this was part of Sandra's experience, no, na yung parang I think people started to talk kasi they were asked by someone na they trusted. Parang ako nakapagsalita na ako, baka ikaw rin yung isa ka hindi pilitan eh. Yung talagang inintay until ready na sila to tell the story. That was my impression of the film. And yung nakita ko sa yung the way na yung Sandra's story was like una denied, my God. Tapos was parang, yung parang dissect at whatever. That's not care, that's capitalism. So and those two will never capitalism and care will never come together. And I think yun eh. I think isang anti-capitalist na mode of sharing stories it is important. And I think mahirap talaga kasi ang publishing is sa ngayon it's very capitalist. It's about profit. It's about what's exciting, so I think yun ang isang challenge. But having said that, care is, as opposed it is to capitalism, it is possible. There are spaces to create that in a capitalist society.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Personally, I actually found support and community with the small presses, the independent presses in the Philippines. So many of us, I can't call myself a young writer anymore, but younger writers, less established writers, have turned to what used to be called vanity publishing by the mainstream presses, right? Or self-publishing, when in fact we turn to this precisely because the system is broken. The system has not worked to support us or to care for us. I had to fight so hard to just get this book out there, and now that it's published, I still have to fight to get people to read it, to get it available so that people can read it, diba? And it's really interesting that it is the people from the small presses like BLPX, care of Shingbi and Adam, Gantala Press, Faye Kura. It's really these small independent presses run by writers who have experienced the same thing that I have. Because we know what the issues are, then we try to do the opposite, right? We try to do something different. I'd also like to touch on something that Lara said about how in that film 11,103, many of the martial law survivors are only speaking now. I'd like to share lang na parang even in our family, to be honest, I would hear martial law stories from my lola, from my lolo, my titos and titas, never my parents. Our parents never told us about what happened to them during martial law. It was always something that I would overhear when the adults were speaking, but they never told us directly. It was something that I guess they found very difficult to even refer to, no? So I was always like grasping for whatever crumbs would come my way. I was always trying to overhear or listen to what the adults were talking about in my family. And it was only much, much later, probably within 5 years before my father passed away, it was only then that My father told me, for example, trigger warning, how sinabit siya ng military sa isang helicopter at sinabi na ibabagsak siya sa bundok at hindi na makikita yung katawan niya. Okay, so during the time when he was giving his testimony to the Human Rights Claims Board, he could not talk about that. He said that if he had given that detail to his testimony, he would have gotten more points and therefore a little more compensation money. Pero hindi niya talaga kaya. Diba? So parang, ito na yung chance, papakinggan na siya, plus it's going to give him a little more money, which of course will never be enough for what they had to live through. Talagang sobrang kakarampot lang yan, barya lang yan. So this was his chance. People were asking for what happened to him, but he just could not. No? Tapos pag naiisip ko yung kwentong yun, grabe, he was 23 years old when that happened to him. Half my life. Diba? So that entire generation, totoo, the best minds of their generation were murdered, were killed, were tortured. So, and again, parang ang daling isipin na that only happened in the past, and then now we think about our friends. You know, whenever there's like an anniversary, martial law anniversary, or some kind of holiday, kinakabahan ako. Kasi kung napansin natin, pinapatay nila yung mga kaibigan natin on these particular days. If you look at the date of Erickson's death, if you look at the date of Kirima's death, they are very near the important dates in our history. And it means that the military is actually sending us a message. It is meant to keep us quiet. It is meant to keep us afraid. So, your turn, guys. Kinakabahan ako. Sana hindi ako maging target.
Nako, maraming salamat, Sandra, for that, no? And definitely the encouragement, despite the whole the you know how heavy the process one has to go through, what you went through. I'm still very heartened. There is still that heartening sense that there's still encouragement from Sandra for us to continue telling the stories, and at least to, for example, ako din, hindi naman ako pinanganak exactly when the things were happening, or maybe I didn't see, but at the same time to continue learning about what had happened and passing on the stories that we have. And I think in that sense I can slightly relate to what Monsi was saying, kasi although pinanganak na ako mga 81. So may nangyayari, pero I guess medyo at a distance ako. Although some family members were also affected. Sandra. Ay, audio.
Naka-off yung mic mo, Sandra.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Francis, like, what was your experience as an Assumptionista who was also raised by Marcos loyalists?
Yes. Actually, when Lara was talking about how strange that, nuns were like super strict with following all these rules, and yet at the same time they were one of those who led the protests, right? I was thinking na kasi Marcos loyalists, as in super Marcos loyalists kami ha, they were close to them. So for me, there was nothing wrong happening at that time there. And then the few times may maririnig kami, sasabihin nila mama at papa na tama lang nang mangyari yun kasi masasama silang tao. Yung ganon there. So ako naman, syempre bata, okay, ganun, they're bad people there. So nalaman ko pa nga yung everything. The first time I actually heard about it was in school. I went to Assumption, and the nuns were talking about how Ninoy was assassinated. And it was such a big word, I didn't even know what assassination. So I had to go home and ask my parents about it. And of course, we don't talk about that. And like, he was a bad man. Ganun na lang. But then you go to school, and then, let's pray for his wife, let's pray for his family, let's pray for this country. ganyan, and you're wondering what's happening, right? So
no? Why take on this particular form, which is the storybook, rather than a written autobiography? So why take on a storybook rather than an autobiographical text?
Because number one, because I had to transform the events into something quite different from what I went through. Just for my own peace of mind, I guess. No, it's really about dealing with my trauma. That's one. Number two, the storybook is more appealing to more audiences because it seems innocuous, diba? It seems safe. It's not as threatening. Because if I had written an autobiography, number one, may bibili ba? Diba? Like autobiography doesn't really sell in this country, number one. And then if it's a children's book, then it has legs. It's seasonal. The appeal of the book is seasonal. Like Christmas, bibilin siya, ibibigay sa mga anak, sa mga apo. Pagdating ng February, because of the EDSA revolution, then I get attention again for this book. Pagdating ng, August 21, pagdating ng September 21, parang people notice it again. No? So that's it really. It's really the visibility. No? It helps, I think, that the book design, the illustrations are fantastic. No? It is a very attractive object. And as object, it's also more portable. No? I'd like to share lang when I was starting my PhD studies, I was thinking that my PhD would be about how memoir, how autobiography could be a way to counter the myths of martial law. I wanted to do like a collection of oral history ng mga martial law babies at mga martial law survivors. Kasi wala tayong pangpatayo ng monumento, wala tayong pangpatayo ng mga museums. All we can do is tell our stories. So that was my idea. But then I also realized that in trying to get the story out, in trying to get the story written, we survivors could be re-traumatizing ourselves, diba? Re-traumatizing our families. Kasi hindi lang naman yung mga aktivistang apekto, diba? Also their children, the civilians, also their parents, their relatives, ganyan. So I guess as a matter of safety din, parang it is better for my PhD studies to go in another direction, which is instead of memoir as monument, I started thinking, how about books as portable monument? Because I read an article by Anne Rigney about how a book is a portable monument because it's so small, you can hand it over to someone else, to a younger generation. Diba? So parang, I guess that's what we can do. Now that they're back in Malacanang, they're gonna use infrastructure again and institutions to further entrench themselves. All we can do to fight back at the moment is to grow our communities, is to stay in solidarity with each other, and to continue telling our stories, and to continue telling as complete a story as we can, meaning as many voices as possible. Hindi lang mga kwento ng mga tinorture, hindi lang mga kwento ng mga aktivista, pero kwento nating lahat. Especially, I think, people like Frances and her family who believe na they're just civilians, they're not really affected, diba? They're safe in their middle class situations, pero hindi tayong lahat apektado tayo. We are part of the martial law story because it's happening even now.
Okay, maraming salamat Sandra for that. No, siguro isa-segue ko lang yung si Monsi kasi I think wanted to respond on the question of of care for our storytellers. And I think this is the point where Sandra ended is somehow related to this. So I think may I call on Monsi before we ask the last question.
Yes, salamat Nico. Actually, yung gusto ko rin i-share no, ay very much related dun sa tanong kay Ma'am Sandra. Hinggil sa bakit nga ba panitikang pambata o nasaan yung naaklat pambata? Yung ganito mga sensitibong kwento na mabigat no yung kontekstong dapat ibahagi ng mga mas matatanda siguro dun sa mga batang mambabasa. No, parang ano rin kasi makita natin yung aklat pambata bilang isang popular na anyo ng pagbabahagi rin. No, malungkot man sabihin ngunit tama yung nabanggit kanina na yung mga aklat na may akademikong katangian o may haba no ay hindi ganoon ka mabili sa Pilipinas. Alam nating ano din no, sistematiko rin yung problema ngayon hinggil sa pagbabasa. Pero yung aklat pambata kasi hindi lang siya yung mismong bookness niya, yung thingness niya, di ba? Hindi lang siya kwento na babasahin, kundi isa rin tong regalo para sa mga mas batang mambabasa nga isang laruan, di ba? Ang mga aklat pambata. Kaya yung sirkulasyon niya, sa tingin ko ay mas ay maigi, no? Maigi yung sirkulasyon ng mga aklat na ito. Kaya nga maigi rin na maglaman sila ng mga kwentong progresibo, maging militante, no? Para mabasa rin ng susunod na henerasyon ng mga Pilipino. Lalo na yung ang mga aklat pambata rin kasi tinuturo din sila sa mga paaralan, sa mga daycare, maging sa mga bahay ampunan at iba pa mga espasyo ng bata. Pati yung mga nagbabasang matatanda, no, ay nabibigyan ng pagkakataong babasa rin ito at natutulak silang unawain yung kwento sa puntong maaari sila mismo magbago yung kanilang pananaw hinggil sa kasaysayan. Diba? Kung isipin natin at babalikan ko lang din yung nabanggit ni Ma'am Lara kanina, no? Yung hinggil sa pagkukwento, no? Napakahalaga talaga ng pagsasalaysay pagkukwento hinggil sa mga ganitong usapin. Sa kaso ng panitikang pambata, actually napakarami nating mga radikal, mga progresibong mga kwento sa Pilipinas, no? Even before the 21st century, marami na tayo niyan. Ngunit ang hirap itaguyod ng mga to, no? Sa katunayan, marami sa mga ito ay nailalathala lamang ng mga NGO, mga antolohiya sa mga akademikong tagapaglathala, at syempre yung mga independent publishers, no? Kaya minsan, yung ganitong mga kwento bihirang umabot sa mga estante ng mga bookstore para mabili ng publiko, no? Pero bukod diyan, parang double entrada kasi yung pagkukupot ng kapitalismo doon sa panitikang pambata eh. Bukod sa hindi na nga mabenta yung mga kwentong to, kaya ang hirap ipalathala, yung mismong bata ay binabansot, no? Tinitignan ng namamayaning ideolohiya na ang bata ay hindi dapat tinuturuan ng ganitong mga bagay. No, kaya malaki talaga yung hamon para sa mga manunulat, maging sa mga guro at iba pang kwentista, no, na mailagay ito sa ating mga kwento, at kung hindi man tayo makahanap ng iba pa na may kukwento sa mga bata, ay lumikha tayo ng ating mga sarili. Siguro isang huling punto na lang, no, ng kahalagahan din ng mga independent publisher na naglilimbag ng mga aklat pambata tulad ng yung Southern Voices Printing Press, no, yung Gantala Press, no, meron din mga aklat pambata riyan. Kung paano yung mga independent publisher ay meron din protective aspect. So, binabanggit ko rin kanina, no, yung kahalagahan ng kolektiba. Bukod sa pagiging ligtas, mas ligtas tayo not as individuals pero as a collective in protest. Yung posibilidad din ng pagbabago hindi naman mararating din sa individual. Naalala ko tuloy yung usapan din namin kasama ni na Jello Suarez at iba pa. Dito rin yung sa PAN, no, ng Institute of Creative Writing. Parang nag-uusap-usap kami. Minsan napapatanong kami sa aming mga sarili bilang mga manunulat din. Ano na after? No, ano na ang gagawin natin after malathala yung aklat, no? Pag nabasa na siya ng mga bata, anong gagawin natin after o yung mga mambabasa? Palaging mayroong hamon sa atin na umalpas din sa mismong pagsulat at pagbasa. Diba? Sa amin nga, halimbawa sa danas namin sa Supling Sining, bilang grupo kami ng mga manunulat din, na batid namin yung realidad na maraming bata actually hindi nakakapagbasa sa Pilipinas. 'Di ba? Mga grade 6 na pero mababa ang literacy. So yung pagdadala ng mga aklat, pag-i-empower ng mga teachers sa magturo ng literacy, actually lahat yung responsibilidad din, I think, no, natin mga manunulat na mag-ambag palabas doon sa produksyon na aktang pampanitikan. Na kung iisipin natin, nasa lohika rin ng kapitalismo, 'di ba? Patuloy na produce ka lang ng produce. Pero yung kalidad ng buhay, kalidad ng pagbabasa even no, sa ating bansa napakahina. Kaya napakahalaga din na ating magagawa sa labas ng pagsulat, ng pagtuturo, ng pagkukwento, no, na para palakasin yung kakayanan ng ating mga kabataan na makapagbasa at lumaban din no, doon sa panunumbalik ng anak ng diktador, ng pamilya ng diktador doon sa Malacanang. Yun lang naman. Salamat.
Okay, maraming salamat, Monsi, no? So siguro sususugan ko lang yung, ewan ko, may isang thought lang na pumasok sa isip ko, kaya siguro children's books work very well because I don't know, this is another idea because you know the possibility of hope and the youthfulness of children is something that can actually contribute to the telling of the story and contribute to care, to healing, no? Because there are spaces for hope. And then number 2, I think napakahalaga nga talaga ng sense of community. And talagang binanggit ito ni Monsi, no? For example, yung experience ko ng pagpunta sa huling BLTX itong nakaraan, parang talagang may pamayanan doon at you know, I think people from different persuasions, different thoughts can gather there and to share each other's work and read each other's work. So I think that's why there is power in the small press and there is power in the small communities within the bigger behemoth, which is the second regimen, no? This rehimeng ikalawa. No? So anyway, may isa pa tayong katanungan. Then after that, mag-wrap up na tayo. Tatawagin ko ang ating mga reactors at ang ating manunulat. Hanapin ko lang po ang katanungan. A striking aspect of the story is that it is set after quote-unquote martial law and that it shows how the counterinsurgent violence of the Marcos dictatorship persisted in the democratization period following its downfall. The Marcoses, as we know, have now successfully returned to political power, with much of the blame being placed on historical revisionism, if not outright distortion. What do you think is the extent played by the role of this counterinsurgent violence, not only in paving the Marcoses' return to power, but also in retroactively legitimizing the dictatorship?
That's a really heavy question, Matt.
That's a very heavy question.
I don't know how to answer it. Feel free.
Yeah. Kasi for example, ako because I used to work in magazines, and I just found it very disturbing that we would feature the Marcoses as these aspirational, stylish people. And alam mo naman, mga Pilipino, basta mayaman, basta actually kahit nga hindi maganda or kahit hindi mabait, basta mayaman, di ba? Fina-follow natin. And there was the media complicit in their return. You know, kasi before, I remember nga, nung bumalik the Marcoses, I just remember my family being grateful to the Aquinos for being so forgiving and allowing them to come back there. Yun. And kasi that's a good thing. We're a Catholic Christian country. Of course, we should forgive, blah, blah, blah. And it makes you wonder nga about that. Like, when do we forgive and when should there be justice there? And then, hindi lang enough. Hindi lang natin forgive. Talagang in-empower pa din. So, yeah, we are where we are because we allowed it.
Siguro para din magbigay naman ng katuwang o katabing perspektiba dun sa nabanggit, no? Tunay na may pag-allow, I think, no? May ganun tayo eh. Hindi tayo hard enough, no? Naalala ko tuloy pag nababanggit nga parang sa ibang mga bansa na may mga dumaang pasista. trigger warning, pero talagang binibitay, no? Yun yung ginagawa para hindi na maulit, hindi na sila mag-extend. No, dahil sarami naman din ng dugong inutang nila mula sa atin. No, pero siguro sa other side, no, sa other perspective din. Minsan nahirap din masisi, no, yung kapwa nating Pilipino dahil hindi passive yung Marcoses sa panunumbalik nila sa kapangyarihan. No, very actively na ginawa nila yung lahat na makakaya nila even a few years after the regime ended, no? A few years after that, bumalik yung mga Marcos sa Ilocos at nagkaroon na ulit sila ng kapangyarihan by tapping to their old cronies, to the local elite. Nabalik sila sa power before 2000s, no? And by then, bakit na, as always sa Pilipinas, pag nasa local government ka na, bakit ka na napaakyat, no, sa mga posisyon? At talagang kahit nung late 2000s lalo na, at least sa abot nababasa ko rin mga pag-aaral hinggil dito, no? Dahil wala pa naman akong puwang nung panahon na yun, ng mga late 2000s. Talagang marami na rin ginagawang mga estratehiya yung pamilyang Marcos para makabalik sa kapangyarihan. No, nababanggit nga sa chat, no, sa chat ng Zoom natin ngayon yung mga iba't ibang pakana, 'di ba, sa social media, nabanggit ni Ma'am Francis sa mga magazines, sa mga newspapers, marami talagang propaganda na nagpapabango sa kanila. And yung mga propaganda na to, they make the Marcoses appealing, something na dapat i-aspire ng mga Pilipino. And of course, yung lagi natin naririnig for the past year, no, yung problem ng disinformation. Na since 2010s pala, napag-alaman nga natin, no, na since 2010s pala, marami ng mga troll farms na parami as the years go by na naglalabas ng disinformation regarding the Marcoses. So habang sila ay nagpapapiteer sa bureaucracy para makataas sa government, meron na rin nangyayaring panloloko sa taong bayan. 'Di ba? Kaya parang minsan pag nung election din kasi, 'di ba? Pag narinig natin lagi yung mga pakiwari ng iba't ibang mga tao, maraming iba sumusuporta, pero pag tinanong mo kung bakit, yung mga sinasabi nila ay actually better fit for a different candidate na mas okay kaysa kay Marcos eh. Pero for them kasi yun yung na-associate nila dahil sa walang humpay na disinformation. And sa datos nga natin, no, doon sa Akademya at Bayan kontra Disinformasyon at Dayaan o Abakada, talagang more than 80 or more than 70% ng disinformation online ay tungkol sa Marcos legacy, no, pagpapabango sa mga Marcos. So talagang niloko tayo, no? Binawi nila sa atin yung demokrasyang sinubukan nating itayo, pero alam nating hindi tunay na nangyari, no? Tunay na ay hindi pa ganap yung panahon ng pagkatapos ng batas militar. Kaya babalikan ko rin din yung nabanggit kanina, no, ni Ma'am Lara, na democracy is a project. At dapat talaga ay lahat tayong makilahok dun sa proyektong iyon sa iba't ibang mga paraan na sa abot ng ating makakaya. Maraming salamat.
May time pa ba?
Go ahead.
Kasi ako naman, and this is anecdotal, no? Kasi I've been thinking a lot about ito nga tinatawag na authoritarian nostalgia. And again, this is anecdotal kasi marami akong naririnig na mga relatives, mga kaibigan na minsan na humihirit na baka nga kasi tayong mga Pilipino, kulang tayo ng disiplina. Kailangan talaga natin ng authoritarian. Kailangan natin ng disiplina. Sabi ko naisip na yung mga humihirit na yon, sila yung komportable eh. Okay sila eh. They don't see themselves as dissidents or criminals. So I think na they always see when they say mga Pilipino kailangan ng disiplina, I think they already think na sila may disiplina na, itong ibang mga Pilipino, sila ang nanggugulo. Kaya kailangan natin ng Duterte. Kaya kailangan natin ng parang Marcos nung batas militar. Dun ako nababother kasi parang and nostalgia is parang I guess there are different kinds of nostalgia, pero the authoritarian nostalgia, right? It's parang a misrepresentation of fascism. it's a misremembering of the actualities of fascism. Kaya doon ako nababother talaga. And I think that's one reason. I think it took me a while to really accept it as a problem. Pero after na nangyari, even sa panahon pa ni Duterte, doon ko na napansin na parang may desire talaga na parang idisiplina the other kind of Filipino na nakikita na as kulang nga na kailangan mag-conform at maging obedient para daw umasenso tayo.
Yeah, our populist presidents have been voted into power by Class A, B, C.
Yes.
Mostly Class A and B. It's not even CBE who voted for them. It's those who are in power because they know that he will still stay in power and they will remain comfortable no matter what happens. I believe that EDSA has the businesses and the middle classes and the upper classes started to feel the pinch of our destroyed economy. That was the only reason why the tycoons started moving away from Marcos. Yun lang. When it hits them where it hurts, which is their profits, their money, saka lang mangyayari. So, parang nakakalungkot na parang kailangan bang maghirap tayong lahat para magkaroon ulit ng totoo at matinong revolution. I don't know. It's scary.
Okay, so maraming salamat Sandra, Lara, Monsi, Frances, at sa lahat ng kasama natin ngayong maghahapon na, malapit na tanghali, no? So sa ngayon, I think ilang punto lang, no? Siguro mahalagang tingnan, napakahalaga ng kolektiba, napakahalaga ng pagpapasa ng kwento, napakahalaga ng care na ibinibigay natin sa ating mga kwentista at itong proyekto. At totoo, malaking problema ang pag na-involve ang pera dito sa eksenang ito. Kaya kailangan talaga itong mga small groups natin, mga friendships, small groups, these presses that are coming up. And that's not really a good wrap up of this session, but maybe because it's starting to rain where we are, no, right now, at baka maapektuhan ng live stream, can I ask one of or maybe Sandra to wrap up our session?
Yeah, I just wanted to end this by saying there is value in the small. Yes, we are parts of small groups. We are parts of small movements. Pero dumadami tayo. Dumadami, lumalawak ang ating community. And so what we need to do is to just keep going, to make sure that we're in touch with each other and to continue reaching out to each other and working together. Yun. Small movements can make greater things, bigger things happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sandra. I think with the forgiveness and understanding of our reactors, let's end on that note because the rains will not listen to our tears. No? So thank you very much, everyone. Sandra, maraming salamat. Bago pa ako umiyak, itatapusin ko na to. Grabe, this is a wonderful discussion and definitely you wrote a wonderful book. Thank you for your courage. Thank you. So anyway, maraming salamat po sa UP-ICW sa pag-gather sa ating ngayong hapon through this PAN session. And sa ngayon po, tatapusin na natin ito. Maraming salamat. Mapapanood po ito sa UP-ICW